give a little background on myself to kind of really help lay a foundation here, and then and really kind of walk you through how I approach process procedures to really create some efficiencies. Through this process, I think it's important to talk about the why. Why is it that we need to adopt efficient process procedures? What are they? What areas do they need to cover? And then, kind of probably more importantly, is how do we get started? What are the things that we need to do as an organization to create an environment in which we lay the foundation that this is a possibility to begin with? Then how do we go about that work? So I'm going to spend some time and really break down each one of these as we go along. And um, first, I probably wouldn't normally spend this much time talking about myself as I am about to do. But I do think it's important to kind of lay some foundation here as to who I am and what kind of uh, background I'm bringing to this discussion. So I have a law degree. I have an MBA. Two things I do not approach operations is as an accountant or an attorney. I have never been a practicing attorney, and I believe that a lot of times, sorry if there's any in the room, but accountants and attorneys can overcomplicate process and procedures. And so I utilize, my education and my knowledge in those areas to help me make informed decisions and really look at things a little more from a compliance standpoint, that those aspects. But when it comes to really of how to conduct efficiencies and how to create process procedures, I leave that side of the brain alone a little bit. So my career started actually in the nonprofit association space. I was in law school, did not know what I wanted to do after law school, fell into working for an organization that I was a member of in law school. And that launched, my career. Obviously, I started out kind of the membership, volunteer management, programmatic side of things. But even early on in my career, as I look back, I really kind of carved out this ability and reputation to be able to analyze how the organization was doing things, why it was doing in certain ways, and trying to find a better way to achieve the goals. When I'm talking about creating efficient and effective processes, I'm talking about how do we get to our desired results as quickly and easily as possible. That is my goal when I'm working with organization, whether my own or consultant work. That's my goal when I'm doing that. And I really started that early on in my career. As my career moved on, I moved into the internal operation roles. And my second role was working for a tech trade association that was a startup that worked with startups. And so I had this kind of double immersion into the startup world. And I mean, there's no better way to kind of really get a grasp of efficiency and effectiveness in operations is than by launching those procedures. And that's really where I'd say my career in operations grew, was being that person who had to build all the pieces together. And a lot of organizations, you don't always have that ability to start from scratch. You have to start from some point, but really looking at, if I could start from scratch, what would I do? I've had that luxury in my career because I've worked with a number of startups. At the same time, my role after that, I did work for a organization that had been around for, I think, 27 years. They were doing $68 million in revenue, but had 2 years of decline back to back. And I was kind of brought in as a change agent for that organization. And I really kind of went department by department to really, dial in, what they were doing, how they were doing it, why they were doing it that way. And we really rebuilt every department one by one. I'm going to share some examples from that a little bit as we go. And then from there, that's when I started my consultancy firm, Lateral Solutions. Quick little story about the name Lateral Solutions. That's derived from the movie The Upside. If any of you have seen it, with Bryan Cranston, he's a quadriplegic, and he wrote a book about lateral solutions and thinking about alternative ways to kind of reach your results and your goals. And I kind of adopted that as my business name, because that's our goal, right? Is our goal is always to try to, like, how do we take what is there, what exists, and create new ways to do that, to help organizations grow, help organizations be more efficient in how they do that. So again, throughout my career, I have this track record of launching operations. And so when I moved into consultancy, that's what kind of naturally fell upon me. It was a little fortuitous. I had some former bosses of mine that came to me and said, "Hey, I'm launching a new company or launching a new organization, or I know someone who is." And so I launched operations for a couple of different organizations and then stayed on as a fractional COO to help them grow. So even right now, I'm a fractional COO for about a $5 to $6 million nonprofit organization that's a trade association as well. I also am working with a tech education platform, a for-profit that is venture backed and is doing a lot of good work in the data privacy space. And so I kind of use both sides of that to kind of help me really grow in what I do and how I do it, and it really give me a fresh look at different ways to improve a variety of different organizations. So again, I wouldn't normally probably talk this much about my background, but I think it's important as we're talking about operations and creating efficiencies and effectiveness to give a little bit of background on who I am and what I've done in the past. So first of all, let's talk about the why, right? I assume, coming to this mastermind and sitting around this room is that everyone here intends to be intentional, right, about creating more efficient and more effective operations for your organizations. But I think it's important to kind of like, let's lay out what are those benefits of why we should be doing this. So obviously we have reduction of cost and waste. Again, my background being in the internal operations space, my history has kind of shown that so much time is wasted through trial and error. And a lot of times that's happening because the person running those functions doesn't really know what they're doing. But if we can create more efficient processes, create more efficient procedures around things, we can shorten that learning curve, shorten the waste, and make sure that the time that we're spending in and around our organization and helping it grow is really going to the bottom line. So obviously, again, I know this is kind of a no-brainer, but really, there's across all different kinds of functions of an organization, there's always ways that we can reduce costs, reduce waste, and that should be a key factor in what we're trying to do when we're evaluating our process and procedures. Of course, a big part of that is improving productivity, right? We are doing these type of things because we want to grow, and the best way to grow our organizations is to make sure that each and every person, each and every function, is being as productive as possible. We want to enhance the quality of what we're putting out by creating process procedures around what we're doing. It allows us to put in safeguards that make sure that what we are doing is as high quality as possible. A lot of times, let me give you a quick little example of quality. And this goes to even a little bit of a compliance issue. So I've worked, again, I've launched a lot of internal operations, and so I deal a lot with accounting, HR, risk management, insurance, et cetera. And whenever I hand off accounting to an individual who doesn't really have a background in accounting, there is something that they always mess up, but it's so simple. It's 1099ing the vendors that they pay. And I go into this every time. I explain to them exactly what to do. Anytime you have a new vendor, immediately ask them for a W-9. When you enter them into your AP system, immediately mark them as needing to be 1099, right? Those are the process I follow every time I'm doing this. Because what happens is it creates this additional quality control system. So when you go to creating your 1099s at the end of the year, you are flagged if you did not receive that person's EIN number. So by doing these initial things up front, you are creating safeguards that you're going to be able to deliver the right product at the end. And again, I realize this is internal, but these are, if you were to get flagged 2 years in a row by not 1099ing the same vendor, you have to start withholding payment, withholding taxes. It's a big hurdle. You can be fined. All of these type of things that can greatly affect your organization. And literally, to put this safeguard in there is one single checkbox. The minute you create that vendor in your accounting software is to mark that they need to be 1099. If you don't get that W-9 and you move on and you pay them anyways, you have that safeguard when it goes to running your 1099s that you're missing their EIN number. And this may be over people's heads. I don't know what all industries you work in, what functions you do. But again, it just kind of really showcases that by just putting in singular, very simple procedures in how we do things can really lay out the process to allow us to increase the quality. And the next point there is risk mitigation, right? So we're creating a better quality by making sure that we're following this function and delivering what we need to our vendors and filing properly with the IRS, et cetera. But it's also reducing the risk that we have for any kind of negative connotations or negative results from the IRS, which again can be fines, being forced to withhold payments, et cetera. So really putting these little process procedures in there can go a long way. Faster time to market. This kind of goes back to what I was talking about earlier about finding the most efficient, effective way to get to the final results. If we are mapping out our processes, mapping out our procedures, and really taking a look at what we're doing, why we're doing it, and how we are doing it, we are going to be able to get things done quicker, whether that's a service and how we're handling our customers coming in, whether it's, again, manufacturing, supply chain, really looking at those components and how they're working. We've all seen, the videos of these high-tech warehouses, Amazon, et cetera, and how, it is automated, it zips, it's, you order something and it seems like something just happens in a blink of an eye, right? Obviously, most organizations and most companies do not have that type of capability, but really taking a look at our process procedures and how we are doing it can absolutely help us deliver on our product and services quicker. And when we do that, obviously, we get better customer experience. I want to talk about one quick analogy that on that real quick of how this can, have risk mitigation, enhanced quality, faster market, better customer experience. Is we have all heard, Fiskars, the EV car automaker, the problems they're having. But I don't know if you've read about one particular issue that's hounding them, which was for months, they were shipping out cars without having collect payments. Yet we are not talking about a pair of shoes, a bracelet you're buying on Amazon. We are talking about $60,000 vehicles that somehow were able to be shipped to customers without ever having collect money from them. This shows a clear breakdown in procedures, right? It's not the quality of the product that affected this. It is the process in which they go through all of this, right? The entire process of how something gets handed off from one person to the next, that really allowed this to happen. I guess at the end of the day, it did create a much better customer experience for some because they at least got a free car for a little while. But I assume that that didn't last forever. So the other thing, was there a comment there?
We just thought we wanted one of those vehicles.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, now you can still kind of get them at a steal for 25 to 30K. Just might have a harder time getting them serviced. So situations like Fisker are very, very interesting to watch, right? And see, what were the problems that they were facing and how and why. And it really seemed like that it was a great company delivering a great product, and it all fell apart very, very quickly. And I think, their process of procedures, it was a big part of that. When you're adopting efficient process procedures, it allows you to know exactly what you're doing and why you are doing it. Right. And when you do that, you have a better ability to adapt and change. When you are doing things very, very willy-nilly, I'll use the Fisker analogy and make some stuff up here, but like if one person bought the car through this salesperson and they handle the contract this way and hand it off to this department, and another person hands it off to this department, and another person hands it off to this department, when it comes down to trying to figure out why it is that people were not making payments before they got their car, you have to go through each and every one of these situations individually to figure out what was happening. But when you have defined process and procedures, and let me add, defined process and procedures that are followed, when there is a hiccup with something, you're able to make a change that much quicker. But if it's all willy-nilly and everyone is doing their own thing in their own way, in their own time, it makes it a lot more difficult to make these changes and improve the quality, improve the performance, improve the productivity. So really having these defined process procedures is going to allow you to make the changes needed so you can grow and enhance your organization. Employee satisfaction engagement. I think this is an area that probably most people don't think about when they're talking about the efficiency of an organization is how does it affect your people? Here's a great example of this. I mean, there are a lot of organizations out there that still, do HR onboarding in a very paper manual process, filling out a paper W-9 and filling out a paper W-2 or W-4 and all that type of stuff, where other organizations are all digital. What do you think most people would rather do and have a better onboarding experience coming to an organization is if they were doing things the same way it was done in 1990, or adapting to kind of the more newer onboarding technology-based ways of doing things. And of course, this is just one basic example. Looking at how bills get paid. If you have people in your organization that are responsible for a certain vendor or a certain project or a certain department, and it's incumbent upon them to make sure that these vendors are paid so these services keep happening. If your accounting practices are messed up, who's that going to fall on? It's going to fall on them. They're the ones that are going to get the email from the vendor or from the customer or the client, whatever it may be, and saying, hey, I haven't been paid, or I haven't received this, I haven't received that. And so not having efficient and effective process procedures is ultimately going to fall back at some point onto your employees. So that is another really big why it's important to pay close attention to this. And we're going to talk about this a little bit more later, but that's also all the more reason to bring them into this process. Of course, again, going back to the adaptability and change, the other aspect of this is when you have process procedures, you know what's going on, you know when it's happening, you know how it's happening, you are getting data. And when you have data, you can make data-driven decisions, right? That's the goal of everything in an organization today is with the amount of technology and data that we have at our fingertips and how our organizations are running. It's important to take that data and to utilize that to make data-driven decisions and change through growth. And that's the point of all this, right? Is to make sure that we are having sustainable growth for organizations, and by putting in these important process procedures to improve efficiency, all of these areas are absolutely going to get better. Now, some may be more impacted than others, but these are the whys as to why every organization really needs to be focused on these areas. So the what? All right. So what are the areas that can greatly benefit from having thorough, efficient processes and procedures? I mean, the quick answer is everything, right? I kind of went through a little bit of a list of different industries before and how that may affect what their operations means. Again, me having worked in the nonprofit world, having worked for a lot of service-oriented companies, technology companies, internal operations for us tends to be those internal operation functions. But it also does incorporate, marketing and some external factors. I have a colleague of mine who works for a conservation district, and operations to them are the people who work in the field, who mow the grass and do the burns and all that type of stuff. So operations means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. Therefore, how we create efficiency and effectiveness differs. But here are obviously not a complete laundry list, but here are some of the areas that we need to be looking at to make sure that we are taking a look at each of these areas if they apply to our organization, and creating efficient and effective operations around them. So your operations in general and your production, again, whether that is manufacturing or your service oriented business, again, how you take that client in, what you do with them, what that next step is, all of these aspects go to the production. Just like you put a piece of metal in here, it gets bent here, bolt goes in there. The same thing happens in the service industry, right? There's a process that should be followed so that it flows seamlessly, and with no hiccups and without missing a beat along the process. And so you really can make sure that all of your clients, all your customers are getting the same quality of service from one person to the next. Supply chain. I have to admit, this is an area that I have not really worked a lot. But again, we all kind of know how organizations like Amazon, right, revolutionized the supply chain and how manufacturing worked and how warehouses worked to make sure that they deliver their products, as quickly and efficiently as possible. Sales and marketing. There's a lot of automated tools out there right now. That can really help you. When something comes in for your website, they automatically get this email, they automatically get this text. 2 days later, they get this voicemail. There's all kinds of things that we can take a look at. What is our process procedures of how we're handling sales and marketing? I mean, everything from like I said, the marketing aspect of these emails, automated emails and texts, et cetera, but also how do we handle contracting? If we're a oriented organization, are we giving our clients a PDF to sign in an email still? Are we giving them a paper contract to sign? Why aren't we using things like DocuSign and other technology-based platforms that really allow someone to review and sign documents that much quicker? The sooner we get them to sign the document, the sooner we get them to pay us the money, the sooner we get kicking and rocking and rolling on providing those services that we're providing them. Finance and accounting. This is certainly an area where a lot of people do not pay close enough attention. Again, this can go back to that invoicing piece as well, but taking a look at the vendors, right, and your expenses. Who's looking at these expenses, where, when, and why. I have a client of mine. We have a specific email inbox that all bills need to go to, but it never fails. It still gets forwarded through 2 or 3 people, including myself, before it makes it an inbox. I don't need to see this. The CEO doesn't need to see it. We are both going to see this in the accounts payable system. But without fail, no matter how many times I tell people, all you got to do is make sure it goes to this inbox. People just want to pass things around. I know it sounds simple, right? Like, no big deal, John. You open up an email, so what? But if every little thing that you're doing in your organization is involving 1 or 2 additional people that doesn't need to be involved, and that's taking up 5 minutes of their time, that happens a couple of times a week. I mean, you're talking about 1, 2, 3 hours a week of time that's being wasted just by inefficient process procedures that are so small and so minuscule they would never affect your business, but it takes away from the productivity amount of time that people are putting in their actual work. Human resources, that's another great example. Like, this is kind of really near and dear to my heart and things I work with organizations a lot on. Again, I know some organizations that are still kind of operating in a 1990, 2000 type model and how they see their human resources administration functions, using paper onboarding forms, like I mentioned before. But it also goes beyond that. When you have your payroll over here, got your accounting over here, you got your benefits over here, you got your tax forms over here. All of these different buckets are all managed separately for a lot of organizations that still have not adopted more 21st century strategy and process for this. There's a lot of HR platforms that exist that really take all those pieces and put it in one easy, manageable place that makes it better for your HR administrator or your CEO, whoever is handling HR, as well as, again, going back to that employee satisfaction. It makes it easier for them. If they want to be able to take a look at their pay stub and they threw it away, but they want to go back a couple months to take a look. They have a login and a dashboard. They can go and download it themselves. How much time are you saving by not having to go and download that yourself and email it to the client and or the employee, have them come back, ask for more questions, ask for more of them. When every time you can just say, hey, look, you train your staff, like you have access to this dashboard, go in, take a look. You can look at all the different things that your benefits, your taxes, your pay stubs, everything is right there for you. Really kind of, teach them to fish, if you will, and it saves a lot more time on administration operations. Again, at one point, for 6 different clients, I was working as a fractional COO in which I did both, senior and junior level work. So I was running accounting, HR, et cetera, for 6 clients. Do you know how many organizations have someone overseeing operations for the exact same size of my clients, and one person is spending the entire time doing it? It's because they don't have these efficient process procedures. They're not using technology to help advance that. And third, as I mentioned before, they don't know what they're doing. And so it's a lot of trial and error. But your internal operation functions can really be streamlined, can really be optimized to reduce the amount of workload on your staff, the frustration of your staff, and obviously information technology, software, cloud-based software is one of the great ways to do that. I am not an IT expert by any means, but I have overseen technology as part of my roles. And again, there's a lot of cloud-based servers and that sort of thing that can really reduce things. More and more, most organizations are moving away from that physical storage, which opens up to additional hacking, opens up to crashes, backing up your data, et cetera. Really adopting 21st century information technology is probably the singular best way to start this process and allowing yourself to move towards efficient process procedures. Your customer services and support, again, we kind of talk about this in different ways, but how you handle your customers. Do you have a chat bot? Do you have this and that? Do you have a ticket system? A lot of different ways that can really help you manage the process of how you're dealing with your customers and make sure that nothing falls through the cracks, right? Again, it's not always just about that initial interaction, but it's making sure that nothing is missed, that you're not shipping a vehicle to someone without collecting the $60,000 first, right? Again, that might benefit the customer for a little bit, but then when they get in that legal battle of having to pay for that car, they're not enjoying that so much anymore. Project management, there's a lot of really robust tools that are out there and how we can use technology to more efficiently, effectively run project management, but there's more simple ones like Monday.com, et cetera. Again, a lot of cloud-based ones that really allow an organization to utilize, the best tools that are out there to find a solution that works right for their organization. Again, I'm a big believer in let's not overcomplicate this. If you are not a development firm, high end technology, you do not need the biggest and most robust project management software out there, right? You just need a place that where you can track what's being done, when it's being done, who's touching it, and how and why, and having that flow in that process. Again, Monday.com is one of those that I've had a little bit of exposure to, and it really just kind of helps move that process along. I've seen a lot, even with vendors that I have hired for my marketing and advertising, that we really kind of see the flow of what they're doing for me, and I can see that in real time but through using software like Monday.com. Administrative functions, some of that kind of falls back into the HR, accounting, et cetera, but also it's simple things like using Calendly, using Fireflies to record your sales calls, your sales meetings, or important meetings, right? Using different tools that that really kind of streamline instead of sending 3 or 4 emails back and forth between you and somebody to figure out what the best time is, utilizing that. I forget what it's called. Doodle, right? Is another one that allows you to send something to multiple people and find the best time that's going to work for everybody. But utilizing these tools and softwares to really cut down on inefficient administrative functions can really go a long way. And before I go into the next step of the how, um, I want to go back to something I mentioned earlier about my first organization I worked for, and how I really kind of came in there and really immediately brought a fresh pair of eyes. Um, and I like to talk about this. I mean, this does have about efficiency and process procedures, but it also goes to the biggest thing of all of this, right? Which is the goal for all of this is results, right? How do we get to the results that we're looking for as quickly and efficiently as possible? So as I mentioned before, I was kind of the person who oversaw membership and volunteer and program management, et cetera. But my role initially started out as a traveling field rep. So my job, again, this was a legal organization that worked with law schools and law students. And my role was to travel around the country and visit these law schools and work with these chapters that were not performing very well. And I did a 2 week training with a guy who was doing the job on a contract basis, and I was being hired on full time. So we went out, we trained, and I was through this training with on the road with him, and then being back in the office and talking to my boss. There were a number of things that I was being told that this is what we expect our chapters to do. This is the end goal, right? This is the goalpost. This is where the touchdown takes place. These are the things that we are expecting them to do. And as I was settling into my role in the first couple of weeks, again, I'm kind of looking at things from a very efficient, effective manner and just analyzing that. And you guys already know that I had the law degree background, but also I was a philosophy major in college and that sort of thing. And so analytics and analyzing things and questioning things is kind of part of my nature. And so I'm racking my brain around about what I was being told, what these chapters should be doing, and I kind of want to know the why, the what, the how of what was the background of this. So I finally went into my boss's office after the first trip that I did on my own. I said, "Hey, look, you guys are telling me that these number of events, this to happen, this to happen, this to happen. Where is this located? Like, where is it documented that says a chapter should do X?" And he reaches behind him off his bookshelf and he pulls out a district conference manual. And the district conference is something that happened every fall with every chapter. Every district held a district conference where we had volunteers or staff from the organization train the new leaders of these chapters. And so I looked at him, I said, "So is this the only place this document exists?" It was a nice little 2-page front and back document at the back of this as an appendix of this manual. I said, "Is this the only place this exists?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "Okay. Um, if I don't go to district conference, will I probably ever see this?" "No, you probably won't." "If I leave my manual at district conference when I go home back to my chapter where I still have another, 6 months of operations, will I ever see this again?" The answer was no, you will not. This was the basis of what this organization did and what we wanted them to do and the why behind it all. It was buried in a manual that got delivered to people once a year if they were paying attention and if they came. So what I did was I took out this document. I made we handed over to the person in our office who did kind of the creative stuff. Made a nice little 1-pager PDF. Put some more bullet points in there, all that sort of stuff, and really made this the document that became the lifeblood of this organization. So every time I was referencing someone that you need to turn in your calendars, I reference this document. You need to register for convention, I reference this document. Now, this was a very, very simple change, right? I didn't reinvent the wheel. I didn't change the mission of the organization. I didn't change how we're delivering our services. All I did was bring this document to the forefront. And my 6 years of being there, we saw 20% increase in membership revenue. We saw a 100% increase in programming. We saw a 30% increase in convention attendance while eliminating all subsidies. We used to subsidize people to hit our numbers, pay for convention. We dropped paying people to come or paying for them or not charging them, and we actually increased it. And all of the success that I had in this organization, I put around that one act of bringing this document to the forefront, making this the pinnacle document that showed people exactly what they should be doing and when they should be doing it. And that made all the difference. And so I like to showcase that from a standpoint of when people think about efficient process procedures, sometimes we think about the warehouse and Amazon. We think about change. We think about these big changes that we had to revamp our website and we got to change our service model. Sometimes it's as simple as bringing a document to the forefront. Sometimes it's these little tweaks and changes that we can make to our process and procedures that show people what and how to do things can make all the difference in the world. So it doesn't have to be these big grandiose things. So, I mean, I know we can talk about the what and the why, but really, the important part of this is how do we get to the how? What are the steps that we need to take to be driving efficiency and effectiveness in our organizations? So the first thing here is assess your current operations, right? That is the first thing you have to do. Is you have to identify the processes that need to be analyzed. When I was COO for the one organization that I told you that had 2 years of decline, again, I went department by department, right? I couldn't do it all at one time, but I went department by department, diving into their process procedures, what they were doing, how they were doing it, why they were doing it. And it uncovered a lot, right? I recovered micromanagement. I discovered that people weren't really using data. So you analyze the process or procedure that you're looking to make changes on. You collect the data on that, and data can be qualitative, right? It had to be some mapped out quantitative data analysis, but just taking a look at that, you take a look at what that process is currently. You map that out, analyze it, figure out what's working and what is not working. So then once you have that mapped out and you can take a look at, okay, this is working, this is not working, we need to make some changes. So the second step obviously is taking action. So you want to take a look at what's working, what's not working, and you set some goals and prioritize. Again, just like when I was COO, I couldn't make every change to every organization right away. You have to take a look at what is going to make the biggest impact for your organization and prioritize. And sometimes it's that biggest action possible to make the biggest impact. Sometimes it's, let's knock out some low-hanging fruit, which is going to move the needle a little bit, but we can make some other changes as we do that, right? So really take a look at what those changes need to be and what your organization, what capacity it has for those changes. You want to build a roadmap. Again, I'm not talking about kind of adopting some kind of long drawn out strategic plan for this, but just mapping this out, right? Like, what is that we're looking to do? How are we going to execute this? Who do we need involved in this? What tools and tactics are we going to implement for this? But really just map this out. And then slowly, little by little, as you make these changes, you start rolling out these new processes and procedures. I think this is where a lot of people stop. They say, okay, we've analyzed, we've discovered that some things aren't working. We put in some new measures to make sure things are better. But it doesn't end there. The third step of making sure that your business is operating as efficiently as possible is to continue to monitor and keep people accountable. Once you have that new process procedure, document it. Does anyone in their organizations have an operations manual? Whether that's internal operations, your marketing operations, your sales operations, do you guys document what it is that you're doing for your operations? Anybody? So that's a really big step, is to make sure that you're documenting that, right? So, someone gets hit by a truck, the Mack truck theory, someone gets hit by a truck. There's a manual right there that they can come in, a new person can come in and pick up the workload without skipping a beat, because it's all laid out for them. And again, it's also that place you go back to when things aren't working right. Like, go back to this document and the processes and review the processes. Say, all right, I see a hole here. This is where we're missing the mark. So you continue to monitor things, allow for continual and constant feedback. I'm going to talk about this a little bit more on the next slide, but this is where you really want to engage your staff and allow for that dialogue to happen. And then, of course, is hold people accountable. When you're handing out, your key performance indicators and you're asking people to follow process procedures, make sure that they are doing so, right? I'm not saying to micromanage, and again, I'll touch that a little bit here, but it's really just about setting the goalposts, making sure everyone is working as efficiently and effectively towards that goalpost, and then making sure that people are doing their job along the way. So you might look at me and say, hey, look, John, all that stuff is kind of no brainer, right? We kind of get that from a high level. So I really want to talk about also for the last, we've got about, 5 to 8 minutes here, I guessing, before Q&A, really kind of talk about some best practices and what I think is the real how, right? How do we really make these changes? So first and foremost, you have got to embrace change. If you want to create efficient and effective process procedures, there's no way to do that without embracing change. And there's no way to embrace change for most organizations without changing the culture. Now, on culture, real quick, let me add this by saying, culture has become a buzzword, right? It's, I kind of blame Silicon Valley and the tech companies for this. Culture has become like, do we have ping pong tables in the break room, and does a fruit cart come around twice a day, and do we have ice cream and socials on Fridays, and do we have an unlimited PTO policy? Now, all of those are absolutely part of a culture. I'm not trying to take away from that. But when I'm talking about culture, I am talking about the practices, procedures, the attitudes, the management styles, um, of how we deliver on a day-to-day basis and whether or not that is delivering on the results that we're looking for, right? So here's a big culture shift for me: allowing people to question everything. How many times have you guys worked in an organization or been a part of an organization, and someone says, why do we do it that way? We just always have. If you have that kind of mentality in your organization, you are not an organization of change. You do not have a strong culture for change, and you're not allowing the right type of messaging through the ranks of your organization to really bring about change. I'm a big believer that you got to allow that questioning and have an honest discussion around that. Now, cultures are formed in a lot of different ways. And whether or not you intentionally build a culture or not, one is going to form. And this is a truth I think that a lot of leaders don't really embrace, and that they have to be the leader in that. I believe that for an organization to have a culture of change, have a culture of growth, have a culture of continual process, and procedure improvement, that has got to be led by the top. So you have to lead by example. You have to allow someone to question you and why you're doing something a certain way. Now, again, I'm not saying, question, unethically, right? Or being a burden on your side, but allow that honest dialogue to take place. Again, if you want to join the 21st century, you have to adopt the technologies of 2024, right? There is no way that you can create a culture and an operation of efficiency and effectiveness if you're not utilizing the technology tools that are available for you to do so. So these are some of the biggest things that I believe that every CEO, owner, operator should be implementing in their organization. And I've talked about this a couple different ways, but it's really important to involve your staff. I think, the old way of doing things, and again, kind of looking at the old kind of manufacturer way of doing things, is, you had someone sitting up top that designed the plant and what needed to happen, and you had people on a line, right? And they did one job and one job only. They put the bolt in, this one screwed it on, this one flipped it over. It was a step-by-step process, and that's all it was. Today's organizations are not like that. And you cannot work for an organization, or lead an organization for change and improvement if you're constantly micromanaging it. And I'll try to tell this story very, very quickly as we're running close to here in the time. But when I was COO for this organization, I came across one department that I just had some suspicions about, right? Like the leader there, I did not believe had the right skill sets to be there. Thought the department was overinflated, too many staff, not enough to do, et cetera. And so I was talking to this manager, and I said, hey, look, I want to talk to your staff. And she encouraged me. She's like, great, I'd love for you to. I'd love for the feedback to happen, et cetera. And so every time I'd ask their staff, do you think your manager micromanages you? And they say, no, she does not. I said, okay. Now, if you're given a job to do, is it more important that you follow every single step she gives you or get the end result? They go, oh, every step. Like, so if you get the end result she wants, but you don't follow every single one of her steps, you're still in trouble. They said, absolutely. I said, well, that's micromanagement. The goal here should be to create the result that we're looking for, not to follow these steps. So you got to allow for people to create their own efficiencies in how they're doing things, create their own systems in how they're doing things. Again, that's really going to open things up for the things to be efficient, effective, increase quality control, reduce risk by allowing them to create their own systems of how their brain thinks about something along the way. The other thing too is let questions and input come from every direction at every level. Everybody in your organization has a different perspective and insight into how something operates. So whether it's your junior bookkeeper or your senior marketing person, they all look at the sales process in a different way and have a very, very different perspective. A lot of people will say, that's a marketing function. We don't want to hear from anyone over here. Or that's a senior leadership decision. We don't want to hear from anyone down here. If you want to create efficiency and create change in your organization, you have to allow for that dialogue to happen, allow input to happen from every single area and every single direction. You also want to make that part of people's job description. Your job is not just to do A, B, C, and D, but your job is to continually find ways to improve what you're doing and improve how the organization is functioning. That's a key aspect that is often missed in a job description hiring people. If I want to create a culture of change and growth, I've got to make sure that the people that I'm hiring have the ability to look at things in an analytical way and improve what we are doing. And lastly here, and involving your staff and others, a lot of people, when they're looking at improving process procedures, the last person they turn to is the new person. Why? Because they don't know anything. I'm telling you right now, that is the best person to be tapping into. Every new hire should be said, hey, look, I know you're new here. I know you're figuring things out, but come to me with any thought you have as to anything that looks crazy, stupid, ridiculous, inefficient, ineffective, whatever it is, I want to hear from you. Not only are you going to boost the culture and morale of that organization, you're going to empower that employee on day one of your organization, and you're really going to help bring some fresh eyes to that. Lastly, I will say that it's important to work with third parties. We are humans by nature. Our organizations are run by humans. We get trapped into habits, and we function in habits. And so sometimes the best way to do it, if we don't have those new people coming in, we don't have, maybe that culture built quite yet, is to bring in that third-party consultant who will take a look at our processes, procedures, do an analysis of our operations. My organization, we do business identity, capacity for change, operation maturity, and operation assessments for our organizations that we work with to help really make sure that the decision makers are aligned, that they're ready for change, and then help pinpoint the areas in their operations where they really could use some additional tools and tactics and strategies to really help grow their organization. So I know I kind of rushed there at the end a little bit. I want to stay on time, but I think it's important to really, if you are looking to create efficiencies and effectiveness in your organization, is really to adopt a culture of change. Adopt a culture of transparency. I think those are the biggest things that really allow an organization to learn from every direction, learn from every angle, learn from every employee, as well as empowering every employee, so that you guys all work together to make sure you're rowing the boat in the same direction and have the same goals in mind. So I will turn over to any questions you guys have.
John, hopefully you can hear us clapping and stuff. We appreciate that. And if you don't mind, I'll take a couple questions.
Yeah.
I have one to get started, and I'll let the others give this some thought. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure of that because I'm using a mic here in front of me. So number one is, first off, I'm going to ask you, is your presentation. I loved your pictures and that side of it. Do you mind if I ask, what did you make that off of?
I just did in PowerPoint. Download the
PowerPoint.
images online. Kind of found one as like, I want to keep the theme of the similar real photo type as opposed to clip art, right? And
Yeah.
keep the same theme throughout.
Yeah, well, I like that. So that's number one. And then you've got a varied background here. So an attorney, philosophy major. So I can tell your unique ability. You fit very well into this role of what you're doing now, your consulting role and what you've done in the past and stuff. The challenge is on small business owners. This is probably the farthest thing from their unique ability. most of them run from it. Besides maybe engineering firms and an engineer, they like processes and procedures. But most small business owners and entrepreneurs do not. So my question to you is, this is not their unique ability. You gave a few things at the end, but what would you suggest for them to implement into their business, and how they could implement this in their business, knowing that this is their probably weakness instead of strength?
Yeah, I think, I spend a lot of time talking to small business owners about their operations. And when I have a prospective client that I'm talking to, almost, say 9 out of 10 conversations begin with, I know our operation isn't working right. I just don't know what it is. Um, and what I have found is that a lot of small businesses, even ones that are looking to grow, especially ones looking to grow, when it comes to operations in their business, they tend to bring in support, strategies, third parties, experts, etc., in the sales, marketing, product development, all of these external areas, right? Those are the areas they focus on, to spend the money. And I get it, right? There is more of you can see more of that one-to-one lineup of money going out and money coming in, right? But what happens when they do that is it sucks the owner, the CEO, back into internal operations, which we just acknowledged was not their strong suit. So I'm a big believer, like, sometimes if you don't have somewhat of a need for a full-time person, bringing in that fractional consultant, that really specializes in operations and efficiency, effectiveness, someone with, maybe someone with a Six Sigma, certificate, that sort of thing. I don't always think those are necessary, just having the mindset and abilities to analyze, but bring in that person. I'm a big believer that if you do not have someone in your organization, full-time or fractionally, that kind of plays that EA plus role, or that operations manager role, as I would call it, that kind of has that catch-all, right? Is that center hub that everything kind of comes through, and this person sees it and knows the functionality of the business. I don't think you always have to go necessarily high level, bringing on a COO if your budget can't sustain that. But having that junior person, in that operations manager role, who can really take a look at how things are working, how they're connected to one another, and really have that analytical mind and problem solving skill. I believe that is the key function that most small businesses are missing. And I would really encourage you to hire that.
I would agree with you, John, because I think especially if you're scaling, if you don't get that in your organization or someone with that skill, you'll never scale your organization. So I appreciate your feedback there. Any questions from the group? Adam, you're welcome to come up, or I think the only way they'll hear you well if you come close. Adam's got a question for you if you're okay on time.
Yep, I'm good.
Thanks, John. Oops, sorry. So you mentioned an example in your, I think it was in the what section, about there's a process to submit invoices. They send it to an inbox, but instead they end up sending it to a couple of different email addresses. And that's kind of like how we function as a company. There's a right way to do it in a way that feels right. And it just seems unsolvable. And it sounds like you're struggling with the same thing. How do you deal with that?
Yeah, I mean, so this situation for me is a little tricky, just because of my role in the organization. When I was, if I were full-time COO and fully, in this organization working, I would just dictate the procedures, right? I'm kind of a fractional person, kind of brought in to troubleshoot, kind of brought in for this and that. So that's why it's difficult for me. But again, I just think you just got to lead people to water, right? When someone, I think a lot of times from a managerial standpoint, it's like, you know what? It's easier if I just fix this myself than to push back. It's easier for me to do this myself than to have someone else. It's easier just to ignore it than to correct people. But if you really just, I mean, I think it usually takes what, sometimes between 7 and 10 times to like hammer something home for people to really get it. But I would say just hammer it home. If I were that person, if I were working in this organization and it was a little more involved in the culture and everything, if anyone ever CC'd me on a bill, I'd be like, stop CCing me. I don't need to see it. If you're sending it to the inbox, I'm going to see it there. I don't need to see it here. Same with the CEO of the organization, right? Like I can never get him just to forward it to the appropriate place. He has accountants that work outsourced accounting services firm that works for him, but instead of utilizing them, he constantly utilizes me for things at a very, very junior level. But again, if I were working in his organization a little stronger, and had that ability to kind of work with all staff on a more day-to-day basis, I would just continually hammer home what it is that's supposed to be done. As a reminder, this is how we do this. I don't need to be involved in this. I'll see it here. And again, explain that to them, right? Like I appreciate you wanting me to know, but I'm actually going to see it once it hits the system. I appreciate it, but you sending this to me is one more email I have to open up. Just trust the system, trust the process. That if you send the document here, it's going to go where it needs to go, be reviewed by who needs to review by, and not clog up everyone's inboxes.
Can I ask one more?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. One more quick question, and I'll just use a law firm as an example because you had the legal background and it kind of functions like we do. So they bill by the hour. And if they could figure out a way to shave an hour off of every project, they might lose $200 on every project. But I mean, you still want to do that just on the hope that it's best for the clients and that they're happier? Or is there ever kind of I mean, when you're getting paid by the hour, is efficiency always the best route?
Sure. That is a very, very good point. I guess here's what I would say to that is um, two things. One is by having your staff be efficient and getting the data as to how much time it takes to complete these projects, you can adjust your rates so you're getting what you need from a financial standpoint, um, while telling your clients we work in the most efficient, effective way possible. We don't do work for you unless it's moving the needle towards results. You'll make that a pillar of your selling point, but then you can also adjust your rates to make sure that every project is bringing in the amount of revenue that you need. That's my first answer to that. And the second one is, you know, they're also, if you clean up some efficiencies, would that allow you to do a little bit more for your client for the same amount of money? Would it allow you to do some little additional quality control to make sure there's no errors, no omissions, right? Are there some additional things if we cleaned up our process here by cutting out needless steps? Can we take those same hours, apply them over here, so that we're billing our client for the exact same amount of money, but we are guaranteeing there's no issues, no errors, and we're delivering a better product or better service with that same amount of time?
Thanks. That makes a lot of sense.
Great feedback. Anybody else? Any questions? Come on up, Brandon. Got one more if you don't mind, John.
We're good.
Thank you. So you mentioned that there are multiple areas of any organization that needs to make sure that they have good processes and stuff, from HR to production or whatever the case may be. But in your experience, is there a one core place to start? Like if you wanted to make sure that one process was working the most efficiently first, like is there do you recommend a starting place or kind of a priority list, maybe would be the question?
So I think maybe the best way to approach priorities Again, I've had to do this before myself, right? Where I went department to department. For that organization, I started my own department of internal operations. I was COO, but obviously oversaw the internal operations as well as the cross-departmental functions. So I started in my own department, right? Those are the place, that's where I made the changes first. Now, so I think there's two ways to look at this. One is which organization or which department or which functions in your organization, if you make those changes, make it more efficient, what is going to drive the bottom line the most, right? Probably something in the sales and marketing component, right? If we can clean up our marketing process, we can clean up our sales process, are we going to be able to sell that much more and deliver a lot better experience for our customers? The other side of this is, look, we think things are moving fairly well over here in marketing sales. It's external. We don't want to disrupt that. So let's take a look at the internal operations. Let's see what we can do internally to improve our processes behind the curtains. So we're still improving that experience for everybody and our staff, but we're not rocking the boat. I don't think that there's a right or a wrong way to approach this and which department first. I take a look at, who do you have? What is your skill set and comfort level in assessing these areas? What people do you have on staff that could do so? Bring that analytical mind to this. And then, do we want to disrupt something externally or internally? What's gonna be the biggest bang for our buck and biggest bang for our time? Is that where we want to start, or do we want to start with some low hanging fruit that's not going to disrupt any one of the external factors? So I would really take a look at all of those and do an analysis of that. And again, I think sometimes the best thing to do is sometimes bring in just a short third-party consultant to kind of walk through your operations and say, look, we know we got to make some changes. Love a fresh eye to take a look at what we're doing and how we're doing it, why we're doing it this way, and help us come up with a plan that will, again, whether it's our goal is to handle low-hanging fruit or maximize impact.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, one more if you don't mind,
Yep,
John.
no problem.
You've stirred some conversation, so thank you very much. Yeah, come on down. See, they got to come over to me to get to the microphone.
Thank you, John. My name's Mike. My wife and I own a technology company, been in business 20 years. And she's the frugal one. She does the accounting piece. I'm the risk taker. And I liked your bullet point on join the year 2024. And I understand we're not in the 90s and 2000s anymore, but she struggles with higher paying salaries to employees, whether it be a sales manager that we're getting ready to hire for the first time, or that's going to demand six figures right out of the gate, and it feels like sometimes the younger generation, sometimes you get a good one, other times you don't get the dedication that you get from some folks that are in their late 30s or early 40s that have been in the industry a while, that kind of thing. Question for you is there any advice I can give to her that softens that blow a little bit of, hey, we've got to change with the times? And that's the verbiage I use. Of course, I'm married to this woman, so I have to deal with that as well. But any advice on the change with the times is much appreciated, and I appreciate you here today. Thank you.
Sure. Thanks for having me, everybody. First, thanks for having me. So a couple things, right? I've done a lot of talks and actually was even featured in a book recently on next generation. I was born in 1981, so I'm kind of right there at that the old part of millennial, right? Older young part. I'm right there, kind of that 10 years ago I was the young person, and now I'm kind of growing out of that a little bit, right? And so I have a lot of thoughts about next generation, and here's something I will say real quickly about that. Which is if you Google, right, what Aristotle said about the young generation, I think exactly what you would say about them. So the problem isn't that the young generation is changing. The problem is we've changed. We've gotten older, we've gotten set in our ways. And so I encourage you to take a look at, you know, what it is that we need to do to bring this generation into our fold. And I think there is sometimes a misconception with young people. Again, I think this is kind of, just, the tail end of kind of the manufacturing generation moving out and a younger generation coming in, that are, I will admit, are kind of know-it-alls and this and that. The key thing with young people is telling them the why, right? Showing them the why of why you're doing things. They want to, more than anything, the younger generation wants to have an impact. And they don't want to just be told what to do and how to do it and when to do it, but create that dialogue, create that culture, right, where they can be involved in the process. And I think you actually will get younger people who will stay longer, be more appreciative, help grow the business, and not just be a warm button in a seat. So there's that aspect. Look, I mean, here's the thing, on salaries, and I'll say, like, one thing that my firm does is recruiting and fractional placements of operations people. And I deal with a lot of owners and CEOs about salaries. Um, I guess here's the thing is for those higher salaries is, can you afford not to pay it, right? Can you afford to bring someone in at the rate you want, who maybe doesn't value their experience and expertise as much as another person does? And is that the person you really want to be in charge or to handle things, or to be responsible for revenue growth, right? So I think that's always an important question to ask is, can we afford not to? Um, Again, as someone who's in the operations world, I understand that operations is a place where, um, the last place that businesses are looking to invest their money. But I have to go back to, can you afford not to? Can you afford to stay, um, spending, 10 to 15 hours a week in the operations instead of working on the strategy and growth? Can you guys afford to bring in someone who isn't the best and brightest talent in a certain area? So unfortunately, sometimes you just kind of have to pony up, and pay those higher salaries. But I will say this: I am a big believer of, hire slowly and fire quick. I believe in setting KPIs, and I don't know what all roles we're talking about here, but I think you mentioned sales and marketing. Put performance stuff behind it, right? And put a base salary. Make if they're looking for 120,000 and your top limit was 80 or 90, make the extra 30 or $40,000 on incentives for performance. There's ways to structure contracts and job offers, so that you are staying in the budget that you want to, for the base salary, but putting incentives out there for growth, that you know if they're going to help you hit these marks or achieve these things, then the money's there. And take a look at, if your goal being to 2, 3, 4x what you're spending on that person, set the goal for that. So that's another way to do it. The last part about 2024 obviously is the technology part. And um again, I have a colleague of mine who's, a family member, that I could say colleague because we kind of do very, very similar jobs. But she's about to retire. And I keep telling her over and over again, you got to change your systems. You got to go cloud-based. You got to do this. She's like, John, I'm not learning it. Like, I'm retiring this year. They can do all the changes they want after, right? So I understand that there is a component of that of this as well. Is that if people who are a little more senior in their years, don't want to learn these new tools and everything. But it really is important, right? And even if your goal for your company is an exit, just to show a company that you have these efficient process procedures already built in, right? I mean, there's two ways about it, right? Because if I were looking at a business that ran manual payroll, manual benefits, all these things, that's one thing I would come in like, I know how to add value to this company. I'm going to streamline their internal operations, bring it into the 21st century, and really get more efficiency out of their operations in a heartbeat. And that's how I'm going to help grow revenue and acquire their business and make it worth my while. But a lot of people don't want to do that, right? They want to bring on an organization that has as process procedures in place, has technology in place, because they don't want to build that because that's not their strong suit either, right? I bring this from a different perspective. So I really, I realize I didn't have a real definitive answer for any of this, but it really, you got to tackle each and every one of these, right? There is, I think that for me, the biggest part of this is, can we afford not to? Yes, if we want to just stay the same, keep the organization running just like it always has been, maybe a slow decline, but at the end of the day, all we care about is, make sure we have retirement, make sure we have some income. We're not looking to grow. We're not looking to build. We're not looking to sell the business. If that's your mentality, then I wouldn't worry about it, right? Just do what you're comfortable with. But if your goal is to grow, your goal is to scale, to have your business acquired, you want to make the investments in it to get to the end result. And again, I don't really know what that sweet spot answer is, but you just have to find a way to justify the expense in correlation with the end result.
Thank you for, bringing that to light. And I agree. And you reiterated on some things I've been thinking as well. So.
And we've got it recorded for Mike so he can share it then later with Dana. And say, I didn't say this. This is what this guy John said. So if you get a call from a lady, no, I'm just kidding you, John. Great information.
Thank you. We have been married a good while, and I just ask for forgiveness sometimes.
Yes, that's right.
John, we can't thank you enough for your time. I tell you, we do have a gift coming to you and stuff for your time that you did and being willing to do this. I know you met me on a podcast and then call out a favor and say, hey, would you come on and meet with 8 business owners and share with them some things about operational efficiencies? And I think the nice part is we had you first and you've really set it up nicely about what we're going to be talking about the next day and a half. And John's information there, you heard him say a couple times, he does have a few services out there. Why don't you share those real quick with the group there? And some of them are taking pictures and writing down your website and things of that nature. You talked about you have the capability of fractional CFO or COO and things of that nature. Share a little bit of that information and then we'll wrap up.
Sure. Yeah. As I mentioned, I kind of started this consultancy as launching operations and then staying on as a fractional COO. I've been kind of working on productizing my services a little bit more to help more organizations grow. So we're focused on recruiting and placement of operational roles, recruitment being kind of for that full-time W-2 role, placement being for that fractional people, those fractional individuals. And I do want to, differentiate fractional versus temporary. Temporary is often, people who are in between work and just trying to find something to fill the void here. What I mean by fractional are experienced operational people, whether it is an operation manager with experience or a COO level, but experience at their level who have decided to take on kind of that more fractional lifestyle for their income. Beyond that, obviously, I do consulting and advising on operations, everything from helping people come up with a strategy to launch new payroll systems, whatever. We still can do the launch piece as well as part of that advising. A third piece of what we do is assessments. And I briefly mentioned this, but we have a slate of products in our assessment tool that really kind of help organization make sure that their leadership is aligned for decision making. They have the capacity for change, and then really looking at their operation maturity and their efficiency and how they're doing things. And that's more focused on the internal operations piece. But they're really the operation maturity is an area where I would really recommend people to do. If you've never done an assessment of your operations, it really takes a look at 47 different areas. Your governance and legal, to your culture, your accounting and HR practices, to your sales and marketing, and really takes a look at the best practices of those areas and where you are currently. It's not an assessment tool to say, hey, you're at an F or a B or whatever it may be, but it's really just a realistic snapshot of where you are in that moment. So where you are, and then providing those steps to take to improve each area. And those reports can really be set up. So again, as we talked before about whether the focus should be the biggest impact, right? What's the thing that's going to drive our revenue the most? Or it can be those factors that say, hey, look, we just want to clean up some practice and procedures. Let's do the low hanging fruit first. But we can really tailor these reports and the strategy plan for each organization of what they're trying to accomplish. So those are the main areas. But first and foremost, I'm always happy to jump on a free consult, learn about your organization, and see if I can provide some initial value in a free consult. And then if there's ways to work together, I'll go from there. So my email is Jon at think-lateral.com. Again, happy to have a conversation and see where it goes.
John, we appreciate your time and thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you as well. Thanks for having me.
Make it a great day. We'll take a quick 5 minutes if that's okay. Hit some restrooms if you need to. And I've got a little presentation and then we're going to have some roundtable discussion.
Sales meetings too. Yeah. I record like we go to a bid opening. I told my guy, I said, write things down, record it on your phone, so you hear things that you miss. That kind of deal. In sales meetings, we'll have